Alright guys, so today we're going to do a step-by-step demo talking about how to create an idling character just like the ones you see here on the right, moving up and down. We'll talk about how to set our screens up so it looks like mine. Note that I'm using Sprite. If you have a pixel editor that you're more comfortable with using, feel free to use that. Maybe you make the wizard just like I make it today, or maybe you make a knight just like I've made here, but do your own thing, get creative with it. I'll talk about how you can build on top of our initial form in the beginning. We won't be drawing a wizard to start with, we'll be drawing just basic pieces and parts on separate layers and then dividing those things up. But first thing we need to do is set up our canvas size. Alright, so our canvas size for this one is actually going to be 64 by 64 pixels. Later in my demonstration I expand it to 80 by 80 just to accommodate the height of this guy's hat here, but 64 by 64 is fine for now. You can always expand it out if you so desire to do so. So 64 by 64, let's get started. You'll notice I have my preview frame brought up over here because at some point we're going to be animating this and I want to see this kind of play out as I go along. Also forgive me if I stutter or if I say something that's out of sorts. I'm recording this live on the spot whenever we're kind of working through this, so I'll edit out the uhs and ums at the end of it, but I'm using Sprite. You're free to use whatever pixel editor that you want to use. I am just going to use Sprite because I think it's the best, and also whenever it comes to other mechanics like setting things up on the screen the way that you want them to look, you can look that up from other videos. We're just talking about how to make a character animation today. Alright, so the first thing for us to do here is make the head of our character. Whenever I do this, I'm actually just going to use my brush tool, which can be found over here, but I'm going to use the keyboard shortcuts in favor of saving us time, but also just teaching us what exists in terms of using our tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit the letter B on my keyboard. So if I hit the letter B, I already have this. It brings up my brush. My brush by default, I guess the last time I used it was 9. If I want to increase the brush size, so I hit B to get my brush tool. Then I hit the plus sign to boost up the size of my circle. This is going to be the head of our character that we can eventually evolve into something. I think that like 22 looks pretty nice for the size of a head, so I'm going to make it 22 pixels. So again, I use the plus and minus sign to increase and decrease the size of my pixel brush here. I'm going to start off with that, so 22 looks good, and I also might decrease it a little bit. Maybe add a bit of a cheek just kind of sticking out to add some additional detail to that head, and also to make it more visible to you guys here in the initial phase. I'm actually going to make it a little bit punchier of a green. Use whatever colors you have over here. You can look up how to import a color palette from somewhere else. Sorry. Then I can use my bucket tool over here, which is like this paint drop thing, but if I hover over that, it says my shortcut is G. So I'm going to hit G and then click on this again so it's pretty visible to you. That way you can see my head as I begin. Now you want to make sure that our layers are organized neatly whenever we step into this. So you'll notice down here I have this and it says layer 1. Double click on that and I'm actually going to rename that the word head. That way I know what's on that layer, and if I need to be able to see what's there and what's not, there's the visible and invisible eye next to this here, so it'll turn it on and off. So if it's off, it means it's not visible. If it's on, it means it is visible. So we've got our head. The next thing we need to do is add a body. In order for us to add a layer here in Sprite, and I don't know what it is in whatever pixel editor that you're using or comfortable with using, the way that we're going to do this is right click down here in our layers. So on top of the word head, I'm going to right click. And whenever I do that, it shows me this window pane here and it says new layer. I could hit shift N if I want, but I'm just going to hit new layer because that's generally what I do. So I'm going to do that. Now, you'll notice that whenever I look at this, the word layer 1 is on top of the word head. So I'll show you what that looks like whenever I put it in. So for the sake of us making this our body, I'm going to just use blue so it's more visible. And I'm actually just going to use a rectangle to create my body that I'm eventually going to build on top of. The rectangle that I would use would be over here. You'll notice that it says filled in rectangle tool. I have all these other options if I click on this. But again, noticing that the keyboard shortcut, if I hover over that, says shortcut U. That's what I use. It may not be your preference currently to use the keyboard shortcuts, but if you want to get this stuff done quick, it's going to help you a lot for you to use these keyboard shortcuts. So I hit U, and then I could just hit G to fill that in. We already talked about the bucket tool, or I could just hit U again, and it would take me to this filled in rectangular tool. But that's what I did. I just used a rectangle. So then, what I'm going to do where it says layer 1 is I'm going to double click on that, and then I'm going to rename that body. So renaming it body so I know what's on that layer. Now you'll notice right now our body is on top of our head layer. I want it to be underneath so that my head is on top of it, and that way whenever I animate it, it looks, fluid sitting on top of it. So what I'm going to do is click and drag the word body underneath that. But I can't just do it just by clicking and dragging straight away, just like this. I actually have to do it so this crosshair, like move icon shows up right here where you're seeing it now. It's right on the edge of this box. And if I click and drag that, I'm going to put it underneath the head layer, and then it should now be in front of just like this. So we're going to do the same thing for our arm layer. So I'm going to right click, hit new layer, and then I'm going to draw my arm in red just so you guys can see. This time I'm going to use my line tool just because I'm going to make a line with this. I could click over here, but notice if I hover over that it says shortcut L. So I'm going to hit L on my keyboard. Notice my default size that I've set it up to in the past was 11. That's up to you. But also recall that the plus and minus key can make your pixel brush size, or my line size in this case, wider or slimmer. So I think that 8 looks pretty good for an arm. So I'm just going to click and drag down just like this. And then I might boost it up a little bit just to make like a hand or something of that size, and click that as well. So now we know how to rename our layers. So then you go down here where it says layer 1. I'm going to double click. I'm going to type in the word arm. And it's kind of confusing about what arm that's going to be whenever I go to modify this later. So it might be a better idea for me to rename that left arm. So I'm just going to rename it left arm. Left arm. There we go. Now, I could redraw a right arm over here, but the faster way for us to do that actually is to duplicate this layer. So, on top of the word left arm that we just added, and I should mention that if you feel like I'm going too fast, don't hesitate to just pause it and follow along at your own pace. Okay, so right here where it says left arm, I'm going to right click, and then you'll notice that if I right click on that, I still have all these options. We've already created a new layer from this. I'm going to click on duplicate because it's going to create a copy of that. Now you'll notice that it doesn't really show up because these two layers are stacked on top of each other, but I'm now going to move this to a new location. So I could go over here and click this for the move tool, but you'll notice it says shortcut V. So I'm going to hit V on my keyboard and it will show this move tool option right here. I have left arm copy selected, and now I can move that around to whatever spot I want to move it to. I want to move it here. Now it's in the wrong order because it's on top of, it looks kind of strange to me. So before I go moving this around, I'm going to go where it says left arm copy. I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to name it right arm so I know what arm that is. I am then going to go right here on the edge of this where it says right arm, and I want this to be underneath the blue body, and my body layer is all the way down here. So I'm going to click and drag this to the bottom of my stack. And notice now how my arm is behind this. And I'll do that later, again, after I add all the details. But right now, we're just setting pieces and parts up, so it's going to be easy for us to animate it later. Alright, so then the last thing that we need to add is legs. The legs in my animation, and for the sake of simplicity, aren't going to have much animation to them. You can add animation to it if you understand this well enough. The first thing we need to do is right-click down here, click New Layer. By default, this is called Layer 1. Again, I'm going to double-click. I'm going to call this legs. There we go. So call this legs. And then I'm going to pick a different color. I think that this time I'm just going to make it orange so that I know what it is. And we know that my line tool from hovering over here is L. So I'm just going to do that with L. And I'm going to click and drag my legs where I want them to be. I'm going to make mine all one piece just for the sake of ease. You could make them separate pieces if you want to animate it doing something else other than just idling. Okay. So this seems a little large to me for the legs. I actually want to make it a little slimmer. So using my plus and minus key once again. So minus, minus, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to click and drag like that. Then I'm going to click and drag like that. So that's my leg. And this will all look nicer in the end. I could redraw another leg, trying to make them the exact same. Or I could copy and paste it. Over here on the right hand side, there's all these options. What I normally would click is the rectangular marquee tool, which is this up here. There's a lot of information there under that, but I'm noticing that the keyboard shortcut for that is M, so the letter M, as in monkey. I could click it, but normally I would just hit the letter M on my keyboard, and I would click and drag around this, and then my keyboard shortcut for copy is Control C, or if you're on a Mac like I am, it's going to be Command C, so Command C. And then I'm going to hit Command V, and then I should be able to move that independently by clicking and dragging. So those are my legs there. They need to be underneath my body. Also, if you need to deselect, another keyboard shortcut here is Command D if you're on a Mac, or Control D if you're on a normal computer, so Control D, that just deselects. So then I'm going to put my legs underneath the body because they're in front of it and it bothers me. So I'm going to do that and just click and drag it like we have before, and put it underneath. So we have kind of our basic setup here. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little time lapse that just shows me modifying this and turning this into my own kind of character, and then we will chime back in with the animation parts of this. It's going to be kind of a long video, so hopefully you can follow through and create a cool animation in the end. Alright, jump into a time lapse now. Alright, so I do want to mention that as I begin this, you will see me jump between layers as I set things up. Right now I'm on the head layer and I'm just getting things set up the way I want them to look. So for the sake of this demo, I'm just making a wizard. You can make whatever character you want. Just make sure that you're on the correct layer as you work your way through this. So if I'm working on the head, then I'm on the head layer. If I'm working on the body, I'm on the body layer. And we talked about this at the beginning, that you can use that little eyeball out to the left to make that layer visible and invisible. That way if it's in your way, it's not in your way any longer. It can just go away, but it's not actually gone away. You can just make it visible again later on. That way you can just see past it as you get further into this. So that's what I'm going to be doing. You're going to see me flickering layers on and off. You also will see me change the canvas size from 64 by 64 to 80 by 80 right here, where this head was a lot taller than the top of the canvas was in this case because he had this tall wizard's hat on. Feel free to change the canvas size if you need to do that. So I'm just going to let this play out the rest of the way, and then I will revisit you whenever we get to the end of this time lapse, and we can talk about how to animate your character. Whatever it looks like is up to you. I hope you guys are enjoying the video so far, so I'll see you at the end of the time lapse. Alright, so I've got my character set up from my time lapse here. Hopefully you've got your character set up. You can do the wizard, I guess, if you wanted to, or you could obviously have done your own thing. I'm not saying that you had to do it this way or that way. The only thing that we wanted to make sure of is that our layers are set up as they should be. And one thing that we need to do before we do anything is just check and make sure that everything is on the correct layer as we piddled around with it and we mess with things. So as I talked about in the time lapse along the way, I'm turning layers on and off just to make certain that what I have on that layer thing. If you don't have the thing on the correct layer, then you're going to have a hard time animating this as you go along. So if you have something where it shouldn't be, you might want to copy and paste it and move it to the correct layer. And also just give yourself some leadway, like right here where I have this like neck that goes up and is underneath the head. Give yourself some leeway there, that way whenever you animate this bobbing in just a moment that you can make that happen. So I'm just checking and making sure all the right stuff is on the right layer. I know I'm going to have to go back and tweak that along the way, but it is what it is. We'll tweak that as we get through the actual animation part of this. And then got the right arm. You can see that this is blocked by the body. I'm not particularly concerned with that being fully filled in because it's not going to be seen anyway. And then I did add an extra layer that's a cape. You can see that I have like this extra little dot here. It's not the most like beautiful thing ever created. When I turn them all on, we've talked about how to turn them on over here, then we can see that it all lines up pretty good. Also, as we get into this animation stage of this, we want to make sure that we have this preview frame showing because it's going to help us understand our animation a lot easier as we progress throughout the course of this. And I'm going to do this in real time so that you can see it moving up and down and we can kind of talk about it as it works. But if you don't have this open, you can easily go to view and then make sure the checkbox for preview is shown. Or what I do is actually hit function key and then F7. So if I do that right now on my keyboard, then this thing will appear and disappear. So I hit the function key, so FN on my keyboard because I'm using a Mac, and then hit F7 and it makes it appear. That's just going to make it easier for us to do our animation. So let's go ahead and dive into our actual animation now. And for this animation, we're going to make it a 6-frame animation. So whatever that is in your software, how you add frames is up to you. But the way that I add frames, or an easy way to add frames, there's 2 ways actually. The first is just to right click on your frame right here. This is 1 because right now our frame is a 1-frame animation. So I'm going to right click, and then if I click new frame, notice the keyboard shortcut is Alt N. So you can use the keyboard shortcut Alt N, but for the sake of ease here and just showing you, I'm right-clicking on the frame number, clicking new frame, right-clicking on the frame number, clicking new frame, and it's doing that until I have 6 frames of animation. Again, making sure that you have this play button clicked. If it shows a stop sign, that means it's currently playing. If for some reason your animation is not working, like I said, then you're checking up here first. That's why it's not working. And obviously you can play it through here, but this just shows you what it's going to look like in the end without having to let it run through down here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, I'm just going to try to play this out as simple as possible. I'm going to drive into the details, why we're doing what we're doing, until I go back and describe it at the end. So we're going to go to frame 1. We're going to leave everything alone in frame 1. We're not going to move anything up or down in frame 1. We're just going to let it be in frame 1. So don't touch anything in frame 1. All right, frame 2. In frame 2, right here where it says body, I'm just going to take that body. So I'm using my move tool right here. This, or keyboard shortcut V. I'm going to use V. So I'm going to take my keyboard shortcut V, make sure I have body selected, make sure I'm in frame 2. Okay, so then I'm going to move it up 1 singular pixel like this. Notice how his belly is moving up and down like that. So after we have the body going up 1 pixel in frame 2, We are then going to go ahead and go to frame 3. We want to do the same thing in frame 3 that we just did in frame 2. So take the body in frame 3 and let's move it up 1 pixel, just like this, so it spends more time up there. But we also want the head to go up 1 pixel with it this time. So I'm going to go to head on frame 3, right here, right above it. I'm going to move the head up 1 pixel. So now you'll notice the head is kind of like trailing behind a little bit. So our body is up in frame 3, our head is up in frame 3. All right, then the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to put our body up again 1 pixel in frame 4 right here. So we're going to go up 1 pixel in frame 4 with the body. We're going to go up 1 pixel with the head in frame 4, like that. And we also want the arms to kind of trail behind it as well. So we want these arms to come up last. So I'm going to select the left arm here in frame 4. I'm going to move it up 1 pixel, like that. And I also want that right arm to go up 1 pixel here in frame 4. So right here where it says right arm, put that up 1 pixel. So now notice it looks like it's kind of following it here. Now, in this frame 5 here, we're doing something a little bit different. Everything's going to start to come back down now. And again, it still will be trailing a little bit. So what we're going to do this time in frame 5 is we're going to leave the body alone. We're not going to go up 1 pixel with it. But we are, for the head, going to go keep it up 1 pixel so it kind of trails behind. Notice how it's trailing behind here in this. And then we also are going to do the same for the left arm and the right arm. We also want them to go up 1 pixel here in frame 5. So I'm going to put that one up 1 pixel. So left arm is up 1 pixel in frame 5. Then down here, the right arm, we're going to put the right arm up 1 pixel in frame 5. So you can see our animation is looking pretty fluid now. And I think that another thing that I will do here is, because my cape here that I added, we didn't talk about adding that, but I'm just going to go ahead and animate that in. And if you want to add other layers to yours, as long as they're in the right order and you get this follow through going, then you're more than welcome to do that. I'm not holding you back. I'm just trying to keep it basic. So then I'm going to have my cape go up 1 here at the very end, so you can kind of see how things are working together. Notice I have this gap here where I didn't draw above like I told you to have that kind of like space filled in. I'm going to do that now, and then I will revisit you in just a second. Okay, so with that fixed, my animation still looks a little choppy, and I think that there is a couple more things that I could do to this to kind of give it a little bit more personality. And maybe you can do this. I don't know what yours looks like, but I did a wizard. Maybe you did the wizard as well. I think what I need to do, I should mention too, that to scroll through your frames quickly, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard. Or also you can use like the greater than, less than symbol, which is what I default to most of the time. So if you want to like just cycle through them quickly, that's how I'm doing that. So it looks to me like I maybe need to have a frame where the head comes down 1, and I might have to do that in my first frame here to kind of sell some additional follow through. So I'm actually going to do frame 1 this time, and I'm going to click on the head. I'm going to have it go down one pixel and see what that looks like. All right, so we're getting a little smoother now. Everything's looking a little bit better. And let me just check and see, just kind of skimming through here, just kind of eyeballing while this is playing out, just kind of like maybe what I want to change. I think that I might do the same thing for the arms, have them go down 1 pixel, but I just need to figure out what frame it is that it would be doing that in. So their high point here in 5, then they come down to their medium point here in 6. I think that I need to do this arm, left arm and right arm down 1 pixel here in frame 1, just as the head did here. So left arm, frame 1, bring that down. Okay, so we're getting pretty smooth. Right arm, we're going to do that here in frame 1. We're going to bring it down 1 pixel as well. So we've kind of got a basic idle animation going. And the cape is bothering me right now too, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Let me figure out what that is. So it's coming up. I want it to be up 1 more pixel here in frame 6. This is if you've added it, I suppose. And then it comes back down to its midpoint. Maybe it's trailing a little behind, so I'm going to bring it down. All right, so this is a basic idle animation, and I think that this is hopefully clear enough to you. But I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you found me organizing my layers helpful. I am going to add a few other touches to this, and then I'll just show you it after I cut here and come back right afterwards. Alright, so we're back here again. So the changes that I made to this really are just like some additional little follow-through bits on the hair and nose and such, but I don't think that you necessarily need that if you're doing something super basic. So I actually made this over again, but as a knight this time, so you can kind of see what your animation might look like here. So let's zoom out on this. So kind of doing the same things that we did before. We have our pieces and parts all separated apart. I need to do some cleanup here on this, but just to show you what this animation looks like without all that additional follow through, it looks pretty good. And then we have some additional stuff here that's just some extra spice kind of thrown on it. But that's your animation. It's all finished. I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope that I was clear enough in the process of me doing this. So if you like the video, then like it. If you feel like this might help somebody else, then share it with them. And if you want more stuff like this, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.